Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our door hinge pins. Something that I want to note real quick is you're going to need a special tool that looks like this to compress the spring that's located inside of the door jamb. You can use a pry bar to get it out of there. It's going to be fairly easy that way. To put it back in though, using a pry bar is going to be super inefficient and even dangerous. So of course, if you have this tool, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Okay friends, now it's time to start replacing our door hinge pins. They're going to be located right inside this area as you open up your door. When we replace the pins, we're also going to replace the bushings. Something that I want to mention before we get started is this spring right along here. It's going to be under quite a bit of tension. It's a good idea if you have a spring compression tool, that's going to help you out. To remove the spring, I'm just going to use a pry bar like this, get in between this area, and then pry it out. Just be careful because it is under spring tension and it's going to want to go somewhere. Make sure you're wearing safety apparel. There's our spring, set that aside. With the spring out of the way, let's continue on to spraying the pin area. That's going to help us drive these out. Do the pair. Next, we're going to use something to pry in between this clip and the door itself, and just try to get the clip off of there. There's one. Let's do the same to the other. All right. That clip was a little bit harder to get to because as you can tell, it's on the bottom side. So that brings up something that's worth noting. The lower hinge right here has the pin that comes down from the top down to the bottom. The upper one up here has the pin coming from the bottom to the top. Remember that for the install. Now the next thing we want to do is carefully put a piece of wood and a jack, gently putting a little bit of pressure on your door. This is essentially just to hold it up. So now that we have the floor jack under here, I also want to mention that this job's going to be easiest with two people. We're going to need one person to go ahead and drive out these pins along here. But of course, once you take out the pins, there really isn't going to be much else holding the door in except for some wiring. If you don't have somebody holding the door while it's on the jack, there's a possibility that it could potentially fall off, damage the door, or even the wiring, or maybe even hurt somebody. All right, so now that we have a second person holding the door for us, I'm going to continue on by driving these hinge pins out of here. I'm going to start with the lower one because it's a little bit harder to do, and then I'll do the upper. My punch under here. All right, that's nice and loose. And right here, do the same thing to the upper. This piece right here should be part of the bushing that's up there. As you can tell, ours is completely junk. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my pins. You just want to be very careful because there isn't going to be anything else holding the door in except for your wiring right here. Now with both those pins out of there, we're going to carefully try to pull this away from the body of the truck. There we are. Now we just need to keep it right as it is so we can pound out our bushings. Just going to try to catch on to an ear with a flathead screwdriver. Come right underneath this area here. All right, there's that bushing. The other one, of course, came out already because that one was destroyed. So you're going to notice as we took out the bushings, the top ones were in the body aspect of the hinge. As we get down here, the bushings are going to be located on the door aspect of the hinge. Keep that in mind during installation. Perfect. There's our last one. Let's grab our pin bushings. Now, before we start installing our bushings, I just wanted you to notice that you're going to have two that have a larger diameter hole than the other two. So essentially we want one of each. I want one with a large diameter and one with a small diameter for each of these hinges. The reason why you're going to have a large and a small is because, of course, the large is going to come down to this shanked area here on the hinge pin. The smaller one fits right along the top part of the shaft. If you were to mix them up, you're going to notice that the small doesn't go down to where it needs to be and you're going to have an issue. Now the top pin came in from the bottom towards the top. So what we want to do is make sure we have our larger pin bushing facing like this. And then the smaller pin bushing facing in this direction. We've got the lip. That's going to go in between the door hinges, kind of like a little buffer in between. So I'm going to take the larger one, come right up underneath this area here. To start this, I'm just going to use some pliers. I'm going to get it lined up with the hole that I need to have it into, and then I'll use some pliers to squeeze it in. Once it's started, we can continue on with our hammer and drive it in. Just use my old pen. Now that we have the larger one in, let's continue on by putting the smaller one up along the top. Okay, so we have both of these bushings in. Let's do the same to the lower. Okay, so now that we have all 4 of our bushings in, let's continue on by putting in our pins. We're just going to slide the door in to where it belongs. When you do that, you want to make sure that this is in the in position like this. That way there it goes around the wheel along the bottom there. Now we'll slide the door in. Now that we have the upper area lined up, let's slide that pin in there. Now we're just going to drive it up the rest of the way. Now at this point, I'm just going to leave this just like that. We're going to start doing the lower one. The only reason why I'm not putting on the clip on the upper is just in case I have to remove it again. Now that we have that one started, let's drive it the rest of the way through as well. Maybe time to put on our clips. If you were to look at it, you're going to see that it has a little bit of a bend to it. We want that bend facing up and away from where the actual pin came through. So for this one, I'm going to have the bend facing up, and on the lower one, I'll have it facing down. Put my socket on it like that. That way there I can push this down. Inspect it just to make sure it's completely secure. This one looks great, so we'll do the same to the other. Okay friends, now it's going to be time to install our door spring. If you don't have the tool for some reason, you could carefully try to use a vise and of course some mechanics wire, something very strong because this is going to be under tension. Squish this down, tie it with some wire in a whole bunch of different areas. Hopefully it'll stay contracted and you can slide it in there. After that, just cut the wire and get it out of the way. For me personally, I'm going to go ahead and use the tool because it's the safest way and I have the tool. The way I'm going to do that is just carefully slide it in between these ears right here, just like that. Now at this point I can continue on by tightening this. You just want to be very careful because if the spring does go anywhere, it's going to go in that direction. Now as I tighten this, it's going to be compressing this spring right here, and then of course we can slide it into the door. Now that we have that compressed, let's get it into the door. Now the spring's going to have to be pretty much completely compressed, so you can see about how far mine is. At this point I can bring it right in, I'm going to slide it into where it belongs, and then I'll relieve the tension from it. It's nice and loose. Now I'm going to carefully draw this out and away. Now looking inside here, you just want to double check to ensure that the spring's situated where it needs to be. It needs to be along the lip along here, and then of course the nub down along this area there. This one looks perfect, so we're going to move along. If yours ended up pulling out like this, you can just go ahead and slide that right back into the door. You definitely don't want to leave it loose like this. Okay, so now that we have everything situated perfectly in here, we're going to test the door to ensure it works the way it needs to. I'm just going to shut it, and then I'm going to feel along this area here. You want to check these lines. Make sure the door isn't sagging in any way. As you can tell, this one's sitting perfectly. I'm going to grab it like this, give it a nice wiggle to ensure that it's latched. If the door doesn't latch, it's probably not sitting properly. Let's go ahead and open it up, and that's perfect. Now let's just wrap up our job. Double check to ensure everything's situated perfectly. Make sure that you have your wiring covered the way it needs to be. After that, close the door, and then take it for a road test.